We've had governors, mayors, we've had sports stars. I don't think I've ever seen a line to say hello to a speaker in the history of City Club. I'm going to be very honest. And I welcome it. I love it. I hate to interrupt it. But I am going to mention two things. First of all, for anyone who does want to talk to Tom or Don, they both have agreed to stick around for some time afterwards too. So I think that's such a neat part of City Club, is that you can come and have these interactive conversations and really talk with the folks and the experts. So if you didn't get to say hello, you can do that afterwards. Maybe shoot a photo or two, or get a forecast like my little guy did about what's going on in Hawaii. So welcome to City Club. I'm Dan Gibbons, and I encourage you, from the City Club, I encourage you to start passing lunch if you haven't already, and enjoy your lunch while we get a little bit of City Club business done first. And I'm here as the CEO of City Club on behalf of our Board of Governors, and we have a couple of very special members of that board here today that I want to mention, and we also had a recent board meeting and some board elections. So it's a special day here at City Club, not only because it's crazy weather and Tom Skilling and Don Wuebbles are here and Chancellor Miranda, but also because it's an important day for the history of City Club. And with that, we've been under the direction and leadership of our chairwoman, Jackie Robinson Ivy, for a number of years now. Jackie is done so much for the club during difficult years, during COVID, and past that, as we have transformed what we're trying to do here at City Club. And I just want to take a moment to thank Jackie for all of her time, all of her efforts, all of her partnership, her friendship, and her steadfast leadership of this great institution at a time when it was needed more than ever. Thank you, Jackie. I know you're not going anywhere. You're here right now, but thank you from me, from City Club, from our board. It's been an incredible experience helping transform this under your leadership. Thank you. And what you've done is you've been able to set it up for generations of leaders to come. And as we're seeing here at City Club, we're bringing those generations up and lifting up the next generation of people who are going to lead. And in that spirit, we have our next board chair is here today. He is someone who is dedicated an awful lot of time, resources, and expertise to City Club. His name is Omar Dagestani, and we welcome him back. Mr. Chairman of the board of City Club, Omar is here. And there's so much that Omar has done to help get us here, and so many ideas that he has. He's going to put us all, and me especially, to work very hard. And so we're really looking forward to all that's to come with City Club. So thank you for allowing us that bit of business. Congratulations to Omar. He's a great friend. He's a great civic leader. His partners from Stiefel are here. They've been very supportive to City Club, and we appreciate that as well. More importantly than that, Omar has his family here with us. His wife Kathleen is here. His parents are here, and his mother-in-law are here with us. Thank you, Omar. Thank you for all that's to come. I can't wait for what that will look like, and I hope all of you will see the results of what we have in store under Jackie and Omar's leadership. Thank you for that. It's a great day at City Club, even though the clouds may be covering it a little bit. With that, and we talked a bit about family, I want to mention another family that's here, and that's mine. My parents, Tom and Kathy, are here, and we actually and thank you for being here, and their friends. And I always say, it's a good City Club program when they decide to come, but you really do when Kate, my wife Kate, is here, and Kate and I decided to pull our kids out of school for today. Because we have a young potential meteorologist, storm chaser, and my son James, and his little brother Alex. So say hi, guys. We're like I said, we're bringing City Club to the next generation. This is just a little further into that next generation. I don't think they have chicken nuggets, but if you do, that would help. So thank you for indulging me in all that. As always, we've got a great group here. Mike Papka's here, Jen Uner. Thank you for all that you've done to make this happen in the University of Illinois system. This has been a great partnership that we'll get into in just a minute. Jan Costner is here. Alderman Joe Moore is here. Art Francic, great City Club supporter. And of course, we have sponsors, and one of those is, as I mentioned, Stiefel, who's always a great partner, and University of Illinois system, obviously a sponsor. The MacArthur Foundation is here, and we've been partners with the MacArthur Foundation on various programs, so we always appreciate that partnership and all that you do for our great city. Thank you for being here and recognizing the importance of what we're doing and what we're talking about. Same goes for the Shed Aquarium. What a wonderful institution is undergoing their own changes and resurgence. So great partnership, great to have you here, and look forward to having you all back. Bob Jordan is here from their board, of course, another familiar face on the Chicago news scene, and just a great group that runs the Shed. Thank you for your sponsorship and support. And of course, the D'Agostani family as a sponsor. Thank you for recognizing this special day. Let's see. What I'm going to do, so we want to hear from our experts, but I do want to mention a little bit about why exactly we're here. And there's a reason. I mean, we hit so many topics here at City Club. Climate change is certainly one that we had talked about doing a lot more. Tom and I had talked about this it was before the pandemic, about creating a series, and it's taken this long, obviously, given what has happened. It was years ago, and here we are now, and it really is because the University of Illinois system, and you heard President Killeen here a couple of months ago, they have brought to Chicago the SRI, the sustainable, oh my gosh, this is what I'm getting there. Too many notes here. The SRI Congress 2020-25. Sustainability Research and Innovation Congress. First time ever that it's been in the United States of America, and it's here in Chicago. I think that's very telling for Chicago as a convener for all these international ideas, scientists. We are the center of the country, we're the center of the world in so many ways, and getting the SRI here through the University of Illinois is really an incredible win for Chicago. And there are so many ways that everyone here can get involved with the SRI. There are so many companies that are sponsoring and that are having programs. Chicago Innovation Awards are having their special session during SRI as well, and they're here to talk about that. There's so much good that's going to happen in June when the SRI is here. And we look forward to hearing more about it today. And we're going to have another program. So with University of Illinois, we've created a 3-part series. This is number 2. And there's a third one to come where we're going to talk about sustainability with corporations and academic institutions coming together. So this is a series. We're tackling issues. We're getting deeper into it. And we're doing it with great partners. So thank you for being here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to invite our 3 panelists to join us up here, and they'll introduce themselves a little bit further. They need no introduction. But like I said, we do this with partners, and one of our favorite partners is Chancellor Miranda from UIC. Chancellor Miranda is going to lead this discussion. And she is a civic leader. She's a partner of City Club. She's a chancellor, an academic, and today she's a scientist also, as you're going to hear. She has some very special insights to all of this and some background that some of you may not have known about. So we're excited to have the chancellor here. Welcome back, Chancellor Miranda. Of course. And we've got Dr. Don Wuebbles. He is an atmospheric scientist of epic proportions. He's at University of Illinois right now. He advises President Killeen. You've advised another president, right?
Yeah, I was President Obama's expert on climate.
Oh, President Obama. Sorry, that president. So he's an advisor to presidents, not just of universities, but of the United States of America. We are so honored to have him here in our presence. He's got a great company that is helping to put some of all that we're going to talk about today into action, and I think you're going to hear a little more about that. So thank you, Don, for being here.
Thank you.
And that leads me to one more. I don't know if you recognize Tom Skilling is here. Tom is retired, so he just hasn't been busy, and he said, "Hey, could we just come and spend some time here?" Tom is needs no introduction. Chicago's favorite meteorologist, and really a family member of so many Chicagoans. And it's just an honor to hand this over to you all, experts. And I'm going to ask the Chancellor to start us off, and I'll come back. I also want to mention that we do have a microphone, and we're going to include the audience in some questions a little bit later if we can fit them in. So please get your questions ready. I'll stop up a little bit, make sure that we're on time, and hand it over to you.
Okay.
Thanks everybody for being here.
All right.
Thank you, Dan.
Well, thank you so much, Dan. Good afternoon, everyone. I think all three of us are really delighted to be here with all of you. There are a lot of different reasons that I'm especially excited and interested in moderating this panel. We'll have Don talk a little bit more about SRI. We certainly have a whole table full of researchers from UIC who are very interested in some of the questions that we're going to talk about. We couldn't have picked a more appropriate day given the incredible weather that we are having in the central part of the United States. And as I mentioned to Tom Skilling, if you ever meet my husband is a much more interesting person than I am, and he's the funniest person I've ever met. And one of the many things that's extraordinary about him is that he has been hit by lightning twice.
Amazing.
Wow.
Twice.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, and live to tell the story.
Chancellor, I've got to tell you something. On your faculty for many years was Dr. Marianne Cooper, who we had speak out at our Fermilab. She's a lightning strike expert physician.
Yep.
She and an Australian colleague are considered leaders in the field, and Marianne would tell us what happens to the human body when you're struck by lightning. And so anyway, I wondered if you had met her, but she retired.
I haven't met her, but I am confident that if you need a substantive expert on any number of things, you can find them at UIC.
UIC, yeah.
So I want to get right into it. I have some questions that I'm going to parry back and forth. Don, you've led assessments on climate change in the Great Lakes region. Today we want to focus on Chicago in particular. So what are the most pressing climate threats facing Chicago?
Well, Chicago's part of the Great Lakes region, and what we're seeing is that the Great Lakes are, of course, an important part of the climate in Chicago. You all know the difference between weather and climate. The climate's the long-term averages of weather. So when we get these large precipitation events, we kind of follow that and say, how is that changing over time? In fact, we've seen a 37% increase over the last century, or less than a century, actually, in terms of rainfalls over 2 inches in the Chicago region. So we've seen a substantial increase in the number. And the reason for that is basic physics. A warmer atmosphere holds more water vapor. And how do we know it's warmer? Well, it's actually increased about 2.5 degrees Fahrenheit in the Chicago area over the last century as well. And then on top of that, lots of changes in severe weather, more intense severe weather than we've had in the past, less likelihood of freezing days. We've lost about a week of freezing days in the last century. And we will lose a lot more over the next 20 years or so. We expect that to increase substantially, as will the number of high rainfall days. And also, we haven't seen the huge, 100-degree days here, except a few times when we've had some major heat waves in the Chicago area. But largely, we haven't seen that here. But we will, as the soils begin to dry from the warmer atmosphere. and it's kind of kept us from having these really high temperatures. But is that the soils have been moisture because of more rain coming as larger events than in the past, and more rain coming in winter and spring. But in the future, we can expect more heat waves in Chicago, expect more flooding, and summers might be drier, so drier summers means a mini drought kind of situation. And along with that, more concerns about extreme weather.
Yeah. So, Tom, I grew up in Detroit. It's not the same thing as growing up in Chicago, but I love this city too.
Yes.
And you know, when I talked, particularly when I talked to my kids about what winters were like when I was growing up,
yes.
Which are substantially different to my sort of layperson's experience, they feel substantially different today. My kids sort of chalk it up to, oh yeah, you talk about how hard you had it back in those days.
Right.
You know, but you're a beloved Chicagoan. You're certainly Chicago's favorite meteorologist. You've guided viewers through what to expect from the weather for decades. You're the expert. This is not just me telling my kids about what it was like when I was a kid. How have weather patterns changed over your career, this decades-long career, and what do you think that indicates about future climate impact?
Well, I was interested in Don's comments about warming. You know, we had the privilege of doing the Chicago Tribune weather page for 27 years, and I brought on board 4 40-year retired National Weather Service meteorologists who worked with us on that effort. And one of them was Richard Koneman, who had spent 10 years of his own time committing the entire climatological database for Chicago to a computer. Mm-hmm. And people in the office would say, what in the world are you doing that for? But he would give these American Meteorological Society chapter meetings that were always fascinating. He could quantify how seasons were changing and all. And I remember his talk about the change between the 1950s and up to the current time. The 1970s, he concluded, were collectively the worst winters in our history in this area. We had more snow, we had more sub-zero cold days and all. Average snowfall in Chicago had gone from...
That would have been when I was growing up. I'm just saying the data is supporting what I tell my children.
Well, you're young. You see, we old-timers...
Did you walk to school back home uphill both ways?
No. I grew up in the Midwest. It was flat. I can't say.
Well, you know something? It's interesting because young people will really have noticed the change. Our average winter snowfall in the 50s was 37 inches a year. We went to 47 inches in the 60s and to 54 inches in the 1970s. And of course, we all remember the Jane Byrne, Michael Bilandic blizzard, among others. And then we had the 1980s where we went down to 26 below zero one January day in 1982. And I remember at the time the climatologists were saying that's a once in 300-year event. And the next weekend we had 26 below again. And that's how things are changing. And in 1985 we went down to 27 below zero. But the fact is the snowfall has come down. Our temperatures, we did some in-house work. We're about 4 degrees warmer on our winters on average than we were in the 1970s. And it's interesting. The hemisphere went into a cooling cycle between the late 1940s and through the 70s and into the 80s, and then we've warmed up dramatically since then. And James Hansen, the NASA scientist, commented on why that happened, because the planet's been warming otherwise. There was just this one little dip. And he says what happened, he thinks, is after World War II, industry that had been shut down suddenly fired up again, and they were releasing all kinds of pollutants, among them oxides of sulfur, which dirties the atmosphere and blocks sunlight. And in fact, he goes into glacial or snow cores in Greenland, and you can find evidence of the oxides of sulfur that precipitated out during the during that period of increased sulfur dioxide. We have since cleaned up our environment, and so the dimming effect of the sunlight has let up some, and of course that allowed the other forces that are driving climate to take over, and we're warming dramatically since then. But I think all of us have seen that. You ask what else? I think the fluctuations in lake level and the rapidity with which those are occurring. You know, if you plot Lake Michigan's levels, and we're down, way down right now. I like to walk along the lake, and it's amazing. We're down, according to the Corps of Engineers, 11 inches from this time a year ago. That's phenomenal in a year's time to lose that kind of water. But there's a sine wave quality to the lake level if you plot it back into the 1800s. I think the Corps of Engineers has good data back to 1911. So the record's most complete then. But these peaks and valleys are occurring closer together and with greater extremes, and it reflects the changes in precipitation patterns that are part of the climate changing in this area.
And so if we look forward and say, well, what lake level is going to be like in the future?
Yeah.
Recent studies are suggesting that we're still going to have this waviness, you know, it's going to go up and down, but a higher likelihood of higher lake levels, which means dealing with all the erosion issues that have been a big concern, particularly back in 2019 when we had the really high lake levels. You know, we need to be thinking about that and preparing it, and you know, that's kind of the message for today. We need to do a lot of mitigation to reduce climate change, but we also got to do a lot of adaptation if we're going to be resilient and we're going to avoid suffering.
You know, we talk about climate change in a number of different ways. There's a lot of research going on at UIC where we're looking at the impact of extreme weather events, whether it be extreme heat or extreme rainfall, et cetera, on health. And there are, particularly amongst the very young and people who are older, the health impacts are really quite consequential.
Yes.
Whether it's through the dislocation of daily habits or power outages or the physiological stress of extreme heat, et cetera. So when we're thinking about how do we prepare for the future, we have to think across all the sectors of our economy. It's really extraordinary.
Chancellor, you mentioned that. Our most deadly natural disaster wasn't a tornado or a flood here in Chicago. It was the heat wave disaster of July 1995. Yeah. And in fact, I attended a conference at UIC with John Wilhelm, who was health commissioner at the time. And right after that, you know, we knew heat was not good for us, but nobody knew the point at which people actually started to die. And so after that, the Daley administration sent out a word to the meteorological community saying, hey, can we get together and work with our health people and figure out how we can anticipate these heat waves and all. And Paul Daley, who was meteorologist in charge of the National Weather Service office and worked with us as our Tribune, one of our Tribune meteorologists, went to work with John Wilhelm, and they poured through morbidity and mortality stats, and they found that every heat episode was accompanied by an increase in morbidity, in death. And of course, it's hidden because when you put on the death certificate the cause of death, they don't list heat wave related. It'll be respiratory complications or cardiovascular complications or something like that. And when you dig in, and often the deaths occur months after the event that precipitated the health decline that leads to death. So,
have you been reading my research?
I probably have much more to do. I'll tell you that, Chancellor.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to another question. So Chicago has such a wonderful history, and innovation has been at the heart of our city for before innovation became the cool thing to talk about, right? Now we're always talking about innovation now. Chicago has been about innovation for a long time. I'd like to remind the audience that the first blood bank, the first open heart surgery, the first organ transplant all happened in Chicago. Chicago is the birthplace of the skyscraper and an elevated rail system. Chicago is where the zipper, think where your life would be without zippers. Wow. The Ferris wheel, walkie-talkies, cell phones, the vacuum cleaner, and the dishwasher, an invention I am particularly grateful for. And let's not forget that we are the originator of really great snacks. Very great snacks like the chocolate brownie, invented here, the Twinkie, Cracker Jack, Juicy Fruit, and most importantly, and my personal favorite, Snickers. So Chicago has been all about innovation for a long time. Don? You were instrumental in bringing, and I know the name of it, the Sustainability Research and Innovation Congress to Chicago in 2025. And innovation is a really important word because it's a solutions-focused Congress. And what better place to focus on innovation than here in Chicago? What do you think this event will achieve, and why is it important and fitting for Chicago to be hosting it?
Well, thank you. So the Sustainability Research Innovation Congresses were started about 6 years ago now. This will be the 5th one. And they've been held in all other parts of the world except here, except in the United States. And the two international organizations, Future Earth and Belmont Forum, are playing a big role in looking at at research and how we putting people together to work on sustainability and the environment extensively. And so I wrote the proposal that then brought that to the United States, and I particularly wanted it to be in Chicago for exactly the reason you're talking about, because it is one of the major cities in the world for innovation and for sustainability. You know, I was a leader in the 2008 Climate Action Plan for the City of Chicago. Mayor Daley asked me to lead the science for that. And that brought about the actions that then help prevent things like major heat waves in Chicago that weren't really thought that much about before. There's a lot more that is being done now, and when we go to the Congress itself, we're going to have a series of plenaries where everybody all comes together for those time periods, and we're going to have major speakers. I brought Jeremy Rifkin. Jeremy is a well-known economist and wrote this book, Planet Aqua. He's going to be talking on the first day at the Congress. Jeff Sachs, another very well-known economist, will be talking on Wednesday. We're going to have special sessions relating to the future of energy, the future of transportation, looking at how indigenous people are looking at sustainability around the world, not just in the United States. It is an international meeting. We will have at least 80 countries represented, hopefully more. And for the first time, I'm really trying to attract business to come to this, because I think we all need to learn about how we can be resilient, how we can adapt, and learn from each other. And that's what the Congress is really about. It's how we learn from each other to be able to carry forward in a way that makes a difference together.
So, Tom, how do you see innovation playing out around issues of climate change in Chicago, and how well is Chicago preparing for climate challenges like increased flooding, heat waves, severe storms?
Well, I mentioned that heat wave situation and all. You know, what came out of that was a plan by which the city proactively opens cooling centers now, works with the media to get the word out, to look in on the elderly and people living by themselves who might be vulnerable to this. May I add one other thing, too? You talk about innovation. Don Wuebbles, among his hundreds of scientific papers, he was among the young scientists who established the connection between chlorofluorocarbon aerosol propellants and destruction of the ozone layer.
Yeah,
and out of that...
This is incredibly important work for all of us.
It really is.
You did.
The ozone layer occurs, up high above Earth, and when you look at a cross-section of the atmosphere and its construction, it looks like a big layer, but if you brought the ozone layer down to the surface and you exposed it to the pressures we all live in down here at the surface, it would be 2 centimeters, less than an inch thick. And I probably have the figure wrong, but 1 molecule of chlorofluorocarbon takes out 100,000 ozone molecules.
You saw that order, yeah. Because of the chlorine is very, very reactive with ozone, and it is not removed very quickly.
And because of that, the and Don helped shepherd this through, the International Montreal Protocol that banned chlorofluorocarbon propellants in aerosol cans. We have aerosol cans, they aren't using chlorofluorocarbons anymore. And as a result of that, we heard about the ozone hole growing bigger and all. It's been shrinking, and our
No, it's shrinking.
ozone layer, stratospheric ozone layer, is in a state of repair. So I just thought I'd mention it.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Well, and I should have mentioned
You know,
that one of the other plenary speakers is going to be Susan Solomon, who wrote a recent book on climate change, but Susan and I co-authored the paper that explained the Antarctic ozone hole.
Wow.
And she was really instrumental in that. I also forgot to mention that there's going to be 120 sessions
Wow.
going on. We have like 10 to 12 concurrent sessions throughout through the 4 days. And they'll be covering every single topic you can think of relating to sustainability, including industry's role in looking at how we go forward.
Don, there's one other thing. When Don when Don was at the Obama White House, the president would walk in and looked at him. What did he say to you, Don? He said, "Oh, apparently you were sending memos to the science advisor, who then passed them on directly to the president." And what did he say? He said, "You're the one who has all that bad news on the climate."
So
something like that.
I was asked, when I was asked by the president's science advisor, John Holdren, to join the White House, I asked John, well, what is it I'm supposed to do? And he says, well, there's going to be lots of meetings. You'll be involved in all kinds of things, like the planning for the Paris Agreement, for example. But one thing I'd like you to do, if you think about it, is could you write a memo regularly about what's happening around the world with the changes in climate? And so it got to be a daily thing for me. I'd write, a couple paragraphs on several different things going on around the world. And I sent it up to John every day. I didn't realize he was passing it on to the president. And so when I met the president, I come into the room, and he's got this big smile on his face, and he's standing next to Leo DiCaprio at the time as I'm walking in. And
This
he
is
says,
a great picture
I
in
know
my
you
mind."
are. You're the guy that writes all those memos about how bad the world is getting to be. So.
There you go.
That's so funny.
Well, I would have said, I know who you are. I taught your paper, your paper on fluorocarbons. It's really extraordinary. And it's well worth it to read the history of the Montreal Protocol on ozone depleting chemicals, because it is a history that tells us that we can face incredibly big, complicated environmental problems, and we can get to a solution. And that is where we need to be now on climate change. We can't be in a place of denying or in despair. We need to be in a place of solving problems, and I think the SRI Congress is very focused on that.
Chancellor, may I add something? We aired a report last night. We've been working on this. There are cuts underway at NOAA.
I'm just about to ask
okay.
about that.
Yeah, that's good.
Before you talk about cuts
Before she does, though, I will just interject quickly. That, scientists have been saying in the last 4 or 5 years that this climate change is perhaps the biggest issue the world has ever faced. We haven't seen exactly what that's going to mean to us yet, but I think we really do need to learn to be more concerned about this and how we then turn this around and get to solutions.
Yep.
Okay.
So before you talk about the cuts, I want to make sure that people understand the setting for these cuts. So the federal government is responsible for enormous efforts to collect data that help us to understand what is happening with the climate and analyze that data as well. I used to work for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, and I'm pretty sure most people don't know what NOAA is responsible for. So Don, I'd like you to provide sort of a little bit of a primer on NOAA for the audience today, so they can understand better what NOAA actually does. And then Tom, I would ask you to sort of talk about the threats that that federal agencies general and that NOAA is facing. So you start with the explanation of NOAA.
Okay. So the agency NOAA sits under the Department of Commerce, and NOAA has a budget of about $6.3 billion per year. About a third of that goes into the National Weather Service. And so that's where you get your weather forecasts. So that's where and that doesn't even include all the observations that are made. We'll talk a little bit about that. So, but there are, in addition to what the National Weather Service is doing, there is the obtaining data from around the world, not only thermometer measurements from 25,000 sites or more around the world, but satellite observations, buoys in the ocean that are also taking this data, many, many thousands of those as well. And so that takes care of the weather part. But on top of that, NOAA is our primary agency for looking at what's going on in the oceans in general. They are the primary agency for fisheries. That's where a significant fraction of budget also goes into that. It's the lead agency for looking at what is happening with our climate and climate change. It's looking at how we further improve our weather forecasts. So that's where research comes in. And so in all those areas that I've mentioned already, but if we're looking at weather, we want to understand sub-seasonal to seasonal. We can predict weather maybe 7 to 10 days, depends on where you're at. But if we want to go out longer, we got to better understand all the very detailed information of what's happening in the oceans, on land, with the skies, et cetera. And those analyses to get the sub-seasonal to seasonal to annual can be so helpful to farmers. I'm a farm boy from Southern Illinois. We greatly improve things. We can really improve industry projections if we can do those things. So that research is essential. And then on top of all that, NOAA is responsible for what's called space weather. So when we have a large solar event that is bringing high energy protons, et cetera, to Earth, and is affecting electronic systems and all kinds of things, they're looking at, how do we try to forecast that and prepare ourselves better for those kinds of situations. So I think that's just barely touching on some of the things that NOAA does, but they do a lot for us. And so these cuts that are being talked about are really going to impact us.
Yeah. So there's the weather and all the data around that. I do also want to emphasize that the National Marine Fisheries Services, which is where I worked in NOAA, the National Marine Fisheries Service is part of NOAA, and increasingly fisheries are a very, very important protein source for people all around the world. So when we talk about climate change and impacts, it has an impact on health, it has an impact on nutritional availability. It is just so broadly woven into everything we say and do. So I worked on the shrimp fishery in the Gulf of Mexico. Tom, tell us about the...
I know.
We caught it.
The federal agencies are under threat right now. Talk about that threat and why should everybody in this room be worried about the threats to NOAA?
Oh, it's outrageous. First of all, it's based on two mythologies that are false. One is that NOAA is overstaffed and bloated, and they view that across the federal spectrum. They think that's true of all federal agencies. And two, that you can privatize it and get the data more cheaply. Both are totally are off base. At the moment, the National Weather Service is operating understaffed, and this has been going on for a long time. In fact, their staff is down 20% from what Congress authorized them to have. So they're working on a limited budget. They've laid off numerical modelers, the folks who take care of the Doppler radars and keep them running, the frontline forecasters, Hurricane Hunter people have been affected by this.
And climate people.
And I should point out, it's a shame you get into politics on this. But, they put out this Project 2025, and one of the goals of that was to get rid of what they termed climate alarmism. That means anything that says that our climate is changing. They don't want data. And NOAA as are the NASA Earth Resources people who are also being cut. They are the chief, one of the agencies that collects the data and does the measurements and all that are important. In the weather arena, which is what I do, they want to privatize. The thought there is, that an AccuWeather or somebody else can do what the Weather Service does. And a lot of people, you get on your phone a radar picture and you think, oh, this comes from somebody else, so shut the Weather Service down and we'll get it from the Weather Channel. Or say, well, where do they think AccuWeather or the Weather Channel are getting the data?
Yeah, that's right.
Every piece of meteorological data in this country is collected by and disseminated by the Weather Service, even if they have a private organization relaying some of this information. So you start shutting down observation stations, and we've stopped launching weather balloons in Aberdeen, South Dakota, Green Bay, Wisconsin, Rapid City, across Maine, parts of Alaska. Yep. Now, you may say, in this day of high tech, why is a weather balloon, which carries a payload of instruments, they start with a balloon that's 8 feet in diameter, and tethered to it is a little box with instruments. And as the balloon ascends, it's sending down continuous readings of temperature, humidity, barometric pressure, and then by watching how it moves away from the launch site, you can calculate the winds through the atmosphere. We can peer down with satellites and get a lot of data. We do that over the 70% of the planet that's ocean. But you can't get a complete sounding, as thorough a reading of the atmosphere as you do with weather balloons. Mm-hmm. And they've taken them offline.
And that provides ground truth for those satellites.
Absolutely,
also.
Yeah. The satellite readings have to be corrected. In fact, there were a lot of climate deniers who cited satellite data that said the planet is not warming the way they said. Well, the reason, the data hadn't been corrected for the errors that was originating from the satellite measurements. So the balloons give us actual readings from an actual thermometer and a hygrometer that takes the humidity and a barometer, an aneroid barometer on the way up and radios it down to Earth. So these data are absolutely critical, not to mention the warnings that are required. And here's the thing. This notion that the Weather Service is bloated and overstaffed. The Weather Service has 4,200 people on its payroll that issue all of the weather forecasts. They collect 6.3 billion weather observations a day, issue 1.5 million weather forecasts a year, and 50,000 weather warnings of all kinds. This is for tornadoes, hurricanes, floods. When the Des Plaines River or the Fox or the Kankakee River go out of their banks, the folks that are modeling those rivers and what the crest will be so that authorities will know how far the flooding will go and where to evacuate folks and how bad the situation is going to be. This comes from the National Weather Service. They have river forecast centers. Airline pilots need constant information. That's why observations are taken at airports, because they calibrate their altimeters that tell them the altitude and all when they're flying. And interestingly, these aircraft have transponders on them that as they fly, they're uplinking information to a satellite that then downlinks it, and that's part of the database that goes into our computer models. Well, we've shut down weather balloons. We're not sure what that's going to do to accuracy, but it can't be good because we've done studies, and there's a diminishment in the accuracy that occurs when you do this. And all this is being done, I have to believe, to shut up what they consider climate alarmism. And, this was all proposed. The plan is being followed to a T. But I think the public ought to know about this. The tornado warnings that we get when lightning's flashing in the middle of the night and you got a tornado dancing through your neighborhood somewhere, you want to know there's a staff that's watching a Doppler radar and telling us when we turn on our NOAA weather radios or other sources of weather information that there's a storm coming. We're about to go into hurricane season. And the balloon launches, even though they're taking place in South Dakota or Alaska or something else, the whole atmosphere is this beautifully balanced medium. You've got to measure it everywhere to get the forecast for Chicago. Something going on the other side of the planet can buckle the jet stream in such a way that it affects the weather over here, and not in 3 weeks. It's a rather instantaneous change. So you need to measure the whole planet, and this is what's in jeopardy. The Weather Service also, as Don says, facilitates our discussion with other meteorological agencies around the world. And there are certain select groups that have dollar signs in their eyes because they think if they privatize it, they're going to make money, and they will in the short run, this handful of organizations. But it, in all likelihood, will cost more money to forecast the weather. First of all, you may charge municipalities that can't afford to get warnings, pay for them, for warning information. But secondly, the taxpayer will still foot the bill for the collection of data, so we pay at that level. What will happen is when they privatize it, then another third party will come in here and sell the data, and we'll be paying them to access the data that we paid for originally as taxpayers to take. It seems to me we ought to tell folks that, because this whole notion that's being promulgated by conservative media, that they're always bloated and they're out there to, screw us in one way or another, that this isn't really going on. And it's also frightening what they're doing for grants for scientific projects. I worry about our universities and all.
I worry about our universities too.
Yeah,
we all do.
So I have oftentimes said that the great underappreciated gift that the federal government provides to every citizen of our country, and actually every person on the globe, is the Weather Service.
Yeah.
Like the return on investment for agriculture, for industry, for people's daily transit, for municipal planning, for floods, for schools, everything, all the information that's so critically important from the Weather Service. And the thing is, you can believe in climate change or you cannot believe in climate change, but you still want to know if a tornado is headed your way.
Yeah.
And the way that we know, so I'll take it completely out of the political realm of, or the you have to believe in climate change if you want to be in this room. You can be a climate change denier. You still want to know if a tornado is headed your way. You still want to know how far the riverbank is going to, at what level the riverbank is going to crest, because there's this complete connection between the weather and the hydrological modeling that we do of river systems, et cetera. You still need and want to know all that information. We have a small farm in Indiana. What we need for our farm is incredibly dependent on the weather service.
Absolutely.
So I serve on the Science Advisory Board for NOAA, and in discussions with Rick Spinrad, who was the former director of NOAA, he said, rather than cutting, we need to add several thousand more people to NOAA, because we're not doing a good enough job providing all of the information people need to be aware of risk and hazards associated with a variety of things, including weather and coastlines and all kinds of things.
Well, the fact you hear us talk about models, one model says this, another says that. What's being done more and more, and will be done as we add AI models to the mix, is that there'll be an amalgam of all these models.
Ensemble
these so-called
models,
ensembles, And
you have been reading my research.
I know. Do you know where I first heard about the Monte Carlo effect to data processing was from Louis Uccellini, who's my friend who was the head of the Weather Service for a long time. And what they do is, because we imperfectly measure the atmosphere, that's why you get different solutions from different models. Also, there are different physics packages in there. We treat cloud development slightly differently in different models. And when you see the hurricane tracks, you get multiple tracks there. These are all produced by models that individually have slight differences in the physics with which they handle the atmosphere and how they handle the initial data that goes into it. And what's been found is if you take the initial data and you reinterpret it, you perturb it slightly differently, and then run it through the supercomputers, the high-speed computers, and then average across these forecasts. First of all, you get a cluster of solutions. One might have the storm track going south of Chicago, the other one may have it going north. But if you get the full range of solutions, in our U.S. model, we run 30 versions of it. The Europeans run 50 versions of their model. And you realize you can assess your confidence in the forecast. If you see the solutions are all over the place, then you say, well, this is a low confidence forecast. And maybe in communicating it to the public that you're telling the city is going to be shut down the next day by a blizzard, maybe you ought to back off it a bit, because there are a couple of model solutions that don't buy into this system, this solution that the city is going to be shut down. So Louis Uccellini says that numerical modeling of the atmosphere was probably one of the top 10 achievements of science in the 20th century.
Agreed.
Yeah.
The lives it saved. Can you imagine telling people to get out of the harm's way on the coastlines with the hurricanes, or at least identify. We went out to Washington, Illinois, little town just east of Peoria that was leveled, a good part of it, by an EF4, that's a 190-mile-per-hour tornado. On a Sunday morning, it went through that community, and the Weather Service out of Lincoln had a warning out 16 minutes ahead of time. People were sitting in church, and their phones went off with the tornado warning. They moved them to safe rooms. And even though 1,100 homes were destroyed or seriously damaged, 3 were killed, 125 were injured, the death toll could have been much, much higher had those timely warnings not gone out. And, and now we've got a situation where the oceans are so warm. I mean, the temperature off Florida of the ocean has been at Persian Gulf levels. It's anomalously warm, near 100 degrees. These oceans impart energy to the hurricanes that form over them. And it's one of the reasons why these hurricanes are rapidly intensifying. So this affects people's decision on whether they're going to evacuate. You watch on TV and you've got a Cat 1 hurricane coming in, and people say, I've gone through a Cat 1 hurricane. I'm going to bed. I'll get up tomorrow and I'm not leaving. You get up and you find the thing is a Cat 5, top intensity hurricane. The destruction capability of such a storm is exponentially beyond what a Cat 1 does, and you're on a barrier island, and you decide it's too late then to get off the barrier island, and you drown in the storm surge. This rapid intensification is happening more and more
and
more
it's
frequently
happening because of the changes in climate, and because that's driving extremely warm water in the Gulf.
Yes.
This energy is being picked up by the storms and causing this huge increase in intensity.
Yeah.
So, bottom line is, this is not the time to be cutting the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration that already is understaffed. And
I think you're both pointing to. I know I'm going to flip it back to you in a second. I see Dan like there's so many more questions I have. I think both of you are pointing. I think both of you are pointing to a really important thing about science So there is this tendency on the part of the public to say, I have a question, what's the answer? I want to know definitively what the answer is. And the extraordinary and beautiful thing about science is that we are in a process of continual discovery. So most of the time, the answer is, well, it's around here, and there's some uncertainty around that answer. And sometimes the uncertainty is like that, and sometimes the uncertainty is like this. Yep. And we have to figure out how to make decisions when uncertainty is like this and when uncertainty is like that. And the decision you make is different depending upon what that uncertainty level is. Definitely. We have to get better I think we have to get better as a society understanding science, understanding the scientific process, how it is that we update our understanding of the world, and how all of that is characterized by data, information, knowledge, and uncertainty around what is considered knowledge. So
I get asked all the time, why do you want to work on something that's so political like climate change? And I have real trouble with that, because to me it's not, and any scientist, it is not political at all. We're trying to understand how the world works. That's our job. That's what we want to do. And in doing that, we happen to come across something that has implications on humanity, and that turns it into a political thing. But we never talk about politics when we have a science meeting. Mm-hmm. Never. Yeah. All we talk about is what do we understand and what don't we understand. Mm-hmm. And that's our focus. And we want to provide the best information we can to the American people.
All right. So Dan, I don't know if you want me to ask the closeout question, or you have some questions from
I would
the
like to see if anyone in the audience has one or two. We have about 10 minutes, and I know we have an engaged audience here, so please show your hands if you do have a question. I see a couple in the back, and I'll make my way back up here. And then Chancellor, I'll ask you to close us out after that. If you could please mention your name and your question. Thanks.
Thank you very much. My name is Mark Altman. I work with Evergreen Climate Innovations. We're a small nonprofit that invests in early stage climate tech innovation based in the region. The question that I struggle with personally, and I'm curious to hear your take on it, given all of the forecasts and the headlines, certainly which have been amplified in the last couple of months about, kind of the dire situation we're in and the trends that we're moving towards. A few different versions of this question, but what gives you optimism? I'm a natural optimist, and I'm struggling to answer this question. What gives you optimism about our ability to sort of divert the worst of the impacts? What can we do as individuals and as communities? And is there any particular innovation that you all see as, there's a lot of potential here to actually have an outsized impact on the climate crisis?
Tom, do you want to say?
I point to what's going on at Argonne National Laboratory right now. There's like a full facility.
You've got the head of Aurora right there.
Oh, yes. We went over and I work with Seth Darling over there. I work with Don, a brilliant scientist. And he talks about renewables and how they could be, will become a part of the energy mix as we go on even more than it is today. But there's a whole effort underway to decarbonize the transportation sector. Coming up with jet fuels that don't increase the carbon content because they pull the carbon out of the air to make the fuel. The engine puts it back, but there's no net increase in the amount of carbon that's being produced. They can literally take an automobile, an electric car, and grind everything down to its basic parts and build a new automobile. That includes the batteries, which, run out of juice with time, and yet you can take the component parts, pull it apart, and build a new battery from it. And they actually do that out there and show you how it's being done. There are jet airplane fuels, and Don has done work on this, which are fascinating. They're looking at new materials to increase battery life. We use these rare earth minerals now. They're seeking, and they'll do that with this new Aurora exascale computer that's online out there. This machine is the fastest AI computer in the world, and the second fastest supercomputer of any kind in the world. I believe my stats are right on that. But this thing does 2 billion operations per second. And I thought, well, how do you get your hands around that? Yeah. If you took every human being on the planet and gave them a computer and presumed they knew how to run it, said, go ahead, start computing, in 4 years, they would do the number of calculations that this machine does in 1 second. Yeah. And it's going to be put to work on mapping the human brain, on understanding how cancer and other diseases spread through our bodies, on artificial intelligence, weather forecast models, on new materials, and the COVID vaccine. They came up with that in something like 10 months. They used a supercomputer down at Oak Ridge National Laboratory to go through a bunch of chemicals, and they could simulate how these will impact viruses. And a process that would have taken about 10 years to complete, they got a vaccine out of that in about 10 months. So there are a lot of exciting things. And this is why this is not the time to cut science investment. Yeah. It's been the brilliance of our scientists that have kept this country in the lead.
Yeah, okay. I just have to brag for one. I just have to brag for one moment. This amazing exascale system that Tom is talking about, it's led by Mike Papka, who's over here.
I saw Mike on some of the videos.
He is an Argonne lab employee, but he's also a faculty member. He is a faculty member at UIC. So go Flames.
So the universities and national labs play a huge role. And I should have started by saying that Tom and I are both failing retirement.
We sure are.
When I retired from university, I came back part-time for the university, which I'm still doing, leading things like SRI. But I'm also part of a company, Earth Knowledge, and companies like Earth Knowledge and industry in general can be a major aspect of the solution of these issues. The development of technology, development of knowledge and capabilities that come out of industry is so important. And with Earth Knowledge, what we're doing is providing, we have a digital twin of the Earth. We're trying to look at the state of the art of the science and saying, what does that tell us about risk and hazards facing companies and communities? We work a lot with the state of California as well as with many companies. And I would love to talk with companies that you all represent, because Earth knowledge can help you plan your future. And there's, but I really want to make, and part of the reason I went this route after retirement is because I think industry and companies are really going to make a huge impact on how we become more resilient.
I'm back here, by the way, with another one. I don't know if you realized I'm here, Chancellor, with one more question, if we could.
Let me just close out. So I think one of the things about being optimistic is to realize that there are innovations going on. Just as climate change affects so many different parts of the economy, the solutions that are being developed affect so many parts of the economy. And when I need a solid dose of optimism around climate change, I go talk to our scientists and I go talk to our students, because they are, and our engineers,
that's right.
They are dogged. They are not going to let this go. There is no room for despair or discouragement. They are moving things forward, and that if you need a dose of optimism, come see us at UAC, my friend.
And we'll keep talking about it here at City Club.
Dan, one other point. United Airlines has invested $100 million in SAFs, SAF, Sustainable Aviation Fuels. Right. And, this is the kind of investment in, and they in turn will invest in research projects to create the cleaner fuels of the future. The airlines realize that their operations put carbon in the atmosphere, contributes to it. I always tell Seth Darling, I fly out to Hawaii, I feel guilty every time I get on the darn plane, because I know my carbon footprint is terrible. And yet you only live a certain number of years on this planet, and it's kind of, you learn something when you travel a little bit. So you're balancing all that. But it's good to know that private industry is committing those sorts of resources to research. And yes.
Yep.
Sorry.
Dan?
Hi there, Edwin Eisendrath. And first, thank you all for a lifetime of helping humanity. It's incredible what you guys have done. I want to answer your question en route to asking you guys a question. What can people do? They can change our government.
Yes.
And they must.
Yes.
They must. You guys can't be so political, and I'm sorry to hear that, but a government that will cut 300 grants to private companies who are involved in energy storage so that we can have a transition is a government that will stop some of these changes for the oil companies. That's what they're doing. Don, there's a chance you won't be able to have your conference if they cancel visas and cut back on your university as they are on others. What's plan B? What's plan B when they come after the grants at Argonne, the grants to the University of Illinois system, and they tell all those postdocs doing this brilliant work that make us so confident in our future that, you know what, they should find another job?
It's, well, I don't know if you have any answer, Chancellor, but it's a big struggle. I mean, there's a lot of discussion going on at UIUC, as I'm sure there is at every other major university, about how do we deal with the potential of what could happen. Because we don't really know whether they're going to, how much they're going to, we already know they're slowing down research. We've seen it in the medical field already. How much are they going to affect our studies of the atmosphere, engineering development, et cetera? And so we're really worried about it because, yes, we do. I mean, our students, that's how we introduce students to science, how we introduce them to engineering or to the social sciences and the big role they play is by getting them actively involved, and then that leads into their careers. And so those funds have been an essential partnership with the federal government to make our entire country and world progress. So it's a big fear, and I don't have any magic solutions. I know there's lots of discussion going on about it, and maybe part of that will be involving interacting more with industry. Part of it will be looking to other sources. And I also, I just yesterday, I had an email from a friend in Canada that said, well, if there's climate scientists that want to move up here, we got jobs for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So.
Don, you know,
So
in the
have-
Washington Post, front page of Washington Post, they had an article the other day about European universities are salivating over this decrease in funding of our American science and research projects because they see the potential for pulling people over into their facilities and a brain drain in this country as a result of that. So, you know, that's a real issue. Kind
Yeah.
of scary.
So you want a plan B. So I'll tell you a little part of a plan B. So the American Association for the Advancement of Science, AAAS, has something called the Vision for American Science and Technology Task Force. I'm a member of that task force. It's been a very important part of work that I've been doing for the past 6 to 8 months. The idea was, regardless of who was elected in November, there has got to be a better plan for American science and technology. So my premise in going it, so first of all, I think we need to do a better job of explaining across the political spectrum the importance of American science and technology and the dominance that the U.S. has had up until this time, and how what we have done that got us to this place is not going to keep us as the dominant player. We have to change our approach. So I care very deeply about national security. And I go into a meeting with people across the political spectrum saying, I care very deeply about national security. That includes cybersecurity, military security, all the different ways that we now have to think about national security. I care very deeply about economic prosperity. And economic prosperity across the many sectors of our economy. If those are the two things that you care about, that are most important to you, and you hear a lot of talk across the political spectrum about those two things, then ceding our dominance in science and technology is a very bad path to go down, because our global competitors are people who are countries that are capable of developing a 30-year plan for science and technology and sticking with it and investing in it. So if you really want to be the greatest country in the world, and you really want to be the dominant player in science and technology, you have to invest in it, and you have to be deliberate about it. So that is very much the message that VAST, this task force, is carrying to across congressional offices, you know, and not just the federally elected officials, but we're trying to fan out across elected officials. So when you talk about changing government, to me, part of it is changing people's understanding of how it is we became the prosperous country that we are. The second part of the plan B for us at universities is that we are in a very difficult exercise right now to figure out what are the absolutely core things that we must keep doing to weather this time period when funding might go down, so that 2, 3, 4 years from now, we're actually in a position to scale back up. Because what we don't want to do at universities and research labs like Argonne, Fermi, et cetera, what we don't want to do is shut down the things that roll you so far down the hill that getting back up the hill is too hard. So we're in the middle of this exercise around what are those core things, what's our financial plan for keeping them going, how do we get philanthropy to help us keep them going, to make sure that we are ready to just accelerate out of the box as soon as the funding scenario changes. Thank you for that. Yeah.
We have so many more questions. I just had to ask Vern for the microphone back, but I just in respect for everybody's time, I think we'll appreciate that you all can head out if you'd like to, but as I mentioned, our guests have so kindly offered to stick around for a little bit. So please stay and ask those questions and approach our guests after we do a quick photo up here. Any final thoughts? We are going to be a couple minutes over, but
yeah, I have my
brilliance here.
My rapid round final closeout question.
I'd love for you to take that away.
Brief answer. You get to quick response. You get to wave a wand and get one climate action fully implemented. What would it be?
So when I give my talks, my many public talks on climate change, I always say if we want to avoid a lot of suffering, we have to do a lot of mitigation and a lot of adaptation. And we got to do both. That's the problem. But I would first start because we need to avoid the worst of what's going to happen later this century, what's going to affect our children and our grandchildren so greatly. I really would focus on mitigation, that we transition our energy system away from fossil fuels and put a lot of effort into that.
Okay, so your climate action is to move from fossil fuels to alternative energy sources. All right. Where's your magic wand directed, sir?
My comments parallel what Edwin had to say. I think we had better do our due diligence on who we're sending out to Washington to represent us. There's a level of scientific ignorance that, I never thought. I remember when we had the little cubes and they gave us the polio vaccine, and we saw young people. I'm old enough to remember people wheeling around in wheelchairs because they were crippled by polio. And when we had the chance to take that little sugar cube in which that vaccine was located, we thought, isn't this marvelous? I mean, we're preventing the spread of a disease that had incapacitated people. We knocked smallpox out of the box and all the rest. Now they won't even, there's some certain sectors that won't even take a measles vaccine thinking everybody's going to get autism. So we better know what these people are because I find there are a lot of people that claim to represent us that aren't representing my views. I don't know about other people. And the one thing about social media, there's a lot of misinformation that's spread there, but you get kind of a feeling for the pulse of America. And when I put word up on these budget cuts that are going for the Weather Service, I thought, I wonder what's going to happen. Is it going to get the MAGA base going? And Don, I watched him deal with that whenever he talks about climate change. And I always love his response. They said, you're there for the grant money. And I always kid Don and say, how's the yacht coming and the luxury automobile and all, because there's so much money to be had in grants, and we laugh about that. But Don, I remember came back to some Fox News reporter who stuck a microphone in his face and said, look, I'm just a Southern Illinois farm boy that grew up with an interest in the weather. And I thought, I remember we had Louis Uccellini, head of the Weather Service, out at our Fermilab tornado seminar that we did for the public for 38 years, packed the house out there. And Louis said to me, I'll come and talk. The one thing I ask is that I be able to take questions. Is that all right? And I said, yeah, absolutely. People asking questions of the head of the Weather Service? I'm sure there'll be interest in that. So he gives us talk, he gets up, and the first question, some guy gets up and he says, well, what's your take on this global warming crap? And I thought, here I've asked a guy to come halfway across the country and speak, and that's the first question you get. And you know what his answer was? It was marvelous. He said, well, I'm glad you asked me that because I'm going to see my father-in-law in 2 weeks, and I get the same thing from him. So here's my chance to practice a response to you. And he said to me later, was that all right? I said, Louis, you couldn't have handled it better. A little humor and all the rest. I mean, there's no way you're going to change people's minds who feel that way. But we better be sure that we get the best of the best representing us in Washington and all of our political offices. Mm-hmm. And so that would be what I would hope for.
All right.
Thank you.
Dan?
And it's a perfect segue to remind everyone here at City Club that we are non-biased, nonpartisan. As I told the Attorney General yesterday, he made a decent argument. You all make a pretty good argument. So, well, we're maybe not biased, not partisan. We are committed to hearing those views of all those folks that we are either sending to Washington or potentially will send to Washington, to hear the experts and talk about the best of the best. I mean, how about these three? I don't think we could have come up with a better.
Thank you, guys.
With a better panel of folks. So thank you. That's what we're committed to doing here, is bringing the experts, bringing the change makers, bringing the future leaders here to City Club in so many different sectors, and certainly from the university sector, certainly from the scientific sector. But I love all the business talk too and how it all works together. And there's so much more to come. Dion Dawson is here. I didn't mention earlier, but there's another young up-and-coming entrepreneur that puts together social good and the right business and the right models to just make something good happen and feeding so many people in our city, in our county. There are great things happening here You heard some of it today. There's more to come. We actually have, at City Club, we have strategies to alleviate poverty in Cook County and beyond with the President Preckwinkle and others on April 9th. We've got the imperative of investing in black men and fathers in Chicago with the Field Foundation on April 22nd. CPS New Arts Education Plan May 7th. And then stay tuned for a really neat women's event that's going to be a unique cocktail event that Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton is going to headline coming up soon. There's so much more to come, and then of course there's SRI, the Sustainability Research and Innovation Congress.
They should have a card on there too.
Yes,
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Doc. This is what I was missing earlier. These are on your tables, and not only does it give you the details about the June 16th through 19th, but it gives you a code, a promo code for a ticket or a certain price of a ticket, and that's also where the Chicago Innovation Climate
I think it's
Summit's going
$100
to.
off of registration.
$100 off registration.
Wow.
You heard it here at City Club, folks. I'm not going to give the code to our viewers online. You have to be here in the room to get that one, all right? Thank you, Don Wuebbles. Thank you for your all you've done for the earth, for Chicago, and for science. I mean, wow, it's so amazing to have you here. Chancellor Lynn Miranda, you are just a gem, and we're so lucky to have you here in Chicago.
Yes.
And what an incredible scientist's way to pull together this great conversation. Thank you. You're always welcome back, Chancellor.
Yeah.
And Tom, same to you. You know you're always welcome.
Thank you, Dan.
And you have done so much for so many in this room and for the city of Chicago. We love pulling these amazing people together. We love that you're all here, and we hope you'll all come back soon, and we'll see you at SRI. We'll see you back here at City Club. Congratulations, Omar. Thank you, Jackie. What a great day. And let's, looks like the clouds have parted. Let's stick around for a little more conversation if you'd like. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks for being here at City Club.